meetings. There has been so much information shared. And I just want to thank the commissioner, the minister, and all other professionals that have given us so much of their time and energy. At this time, I would like to welcome the Minister of Education, the Honorable Diallo Rodain, JPMP, to give us his greeting tonight.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you and welcome you to this consultation meeting, the second meeting that we're had for specifically the Sands Parish proposal. As we've stated, and we will continue to state, and I recognize some of the comments that we have received, whether it be directly through this process or on social media, that what we are talking about tonight is a proposal, and it is still just a proposal. No decisions have been made, and no decisions will be made until the end of the proposal process, in which we will then look at all of the submissions that we have gotten, and we will make a decision that is based on what is best for our education system and for our children. And so I welcome you to engage. I welcome you to listen to the presentation that we will be giving tonight, and I ask you to engage and make this a healthy conversation. What we want is people to give their honest feedback, and we want people to be able to feel free to say, this is why I agree, this is why I agree, I disagree, and this is why I disagree. What we don't want is persons to just say no because they want to say no, or persons to say yes just because they want to say yes. Tonight is your opportunity to listen and ask questions, and listen to us present this proposed vision for our primary schools. We pledge to answer any and all questions that come our way. We will be looking at the questions posed, and some of them will be similar in nature, so you might not hear your exact question asked, but rest assured that we are recording every single comment that comes, and every single comment will be part of the final report as we pass through and have these constructive conversations. Our children, one thing that we do know, and I think we can all agree on, is that our children deserve the best public education system that can be offered, the best in 21st century learning, teaching facilities, and technology. But we have to be bold and look at where we are today and where we want to be tomorrow. And that is going to require some real reform within our education system. And this is where we're starting with the conversations like we're having tonight. I think it's important for me to require you or ask you to look at education reform, not exclusively through the lens of what you saw when you were in school, but to understand that sometimes we have to kind of say that worked at that time, but this is a different time that we find ourselves in. While there are some things that will always remain the same when we're talking about education, there are other things that have to change, that must change, and should change. And so what I do want you to recognize is that when we talk about overall education reform, this parish primary school proposal that we're talking about is but one of the pillars that are being worked on. The other ones being the group that's together looking at the education authority and how that will handle the overall governance of the proposed school system. The implementation of the Learning First program to provide an avenue for improved delivery of education and professional development for our teachers. And of course, the phasing out of middle schools and the return to a two-tier system from the three-tier system that we have currently. One of the things that, and a recurring theme with all of the meetings that we have had, and not just this particular meeting as well, is the discussion around the historical legacy of our schools. And before we even began our sessions, I had conversations with persons who expressed that. And this is where these type of conversations are positive, and they are looking to get the ideas from the people who are out there. And the idea that was brought forth and was like, hey, what are we doing to preserve the legacy of our schools? Because there are some rich legacies out there that need to be preserved. And I thought about that, and I said, something that is completely right. We have to come up with a methodology of preserving the legacy of our schools. We have 18 primary schools now. The youngest one of them is 46 years old. The oldest ones are over a century. All of our primary schools have a rich and powerful legacy that needs to be preserved in some way, shape, or form. But when I really thought about that, and I said to myself, my daughter, who's 11 years old now, and just moved from Elliott to Whitney Middle School, if she was given a project to write a historical narrative on any one of our primary schools, where would she go to find that information? Where could any of us go to literally find information on our school? So we've gotten lots of submissions about the history of this particular school, the history of that particular school. And so it's out there. It's out there. It just needs to be collated. And so when we talk about that, it has to be documented in such a way that persons can have access to that. And access to that rich historical legacy should not depend on the physical building, because the legacy will live on. The legacies of all of our schools will live on if we find a way to record that legacy and do it properly. So when we're talking about parish primary schools and we're talking about what's best in learning for our children, you know, there are things, there are ideas that have been put forth that are very, very credible and need to be taken into account. What will we rename? What can we just rename our schools? What about looking at our schools and finding educators that have meaningful contributions in their communities, in their parishes, and naming schools after them, naming buildings after them, naming projects or competitions, educational competitions after them. That's how we keep our people's legacies alive, by ensuring that they are passed on from generation to generation, but not necessarily attached to an actual physical building. We've had schools in Bermuda with rich, powerful legacies that have moved from building to building to building. But the only thing, the building may not have survived, but the legacy of that school has, because it's been documented and it has been passed on. So as the commissioner will explain, we've developed a series of proposals for reshaping the school system. So we want to invest in our children. We want to create a system that's more equitable than the system we have today. Learning environments that will support the teaching, the learning, and the curriculum to help students develop the skills and knowledge and values and those relationships to allow them to thrive and survive in our island home. One other thing that comes up, and I do just want to touch on it, is the time frame. So where's the funding going to come from? We have to get this done. We are not at a position to make the decisions on how much it's going to cost for us to do what we want to do. That will come. That will come. What we are in right now is a position to talk about what is it that our children need. Because if we try to put a price tag on that and then squeeze everything under that price tag, some things are going to get left out. And we cannot, we've done that for far too long, looked at our system from that perspective. We need to look at our system of what our children need to be successful in Bermuda, and then start looking at what do we need, what resources we need to ensure that our children get what it is that we have decided that they need. And so when we talk about that and we talk about time frames, we can't put time frames on this as well, because this is going to be a growing process, and we're all going to grow with this together. We're going to put something together that plots the pathway to get from where we are to where we want to be. We cannot start plotting that pathway until we make the vital decisions, such as one that we're looking at today. So what I'm asking for is your comments.
Minister, you muted yourself.
I'm sorry, I didn't mute someone muted everybody in the room. I saw that pop up. I was just ending my contribution by saying thank you and welcome you for coming out, and I look forward to today's session.
Thank you for that, Minister. And as you highlighted, the purpose of this parish consultation meeting is to get feedback. So please feel free to ask your questions. You can leave them in the Zoom comments if you're joining us on Zoom. However, if you are on Facebook, you can leave them as a Facebook comment. We are collecting information via Menti. Our code for the night is 6921788. The data team will also populate that into the chat. So if you want to click on that, if you are on Zoom, you can. Alternatively, if you do want to call in, we do have persons answering the phone at CITV. The number is 478-3301. Additionally, if you have further feedback or questions that might be too much for this forum, we are welcoming feedback to consultation@med.bm. So what you can expect from tonight, we're going to have a two-part presentation by the Commissioner of Education as well as our other education officials. After each of the presentation sections, we will have question and answers. So there will be plenty of opportunities for you to ask your questions. And yes, please ask as many questions. No question is a dumb question. So we are welcoming everything. The first part of the presentation, we're going to go to the Commissioner of Education so she can share that with us now.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Trott. Good evening to our Sands Parish stakeholders and other stakeholders, community stakeholders who are online with us. Thank you so much for joining our consultation meeting. We want to begin by stating that we believe that we must improve public education for our students, and we need all of you to join us because we all have a responsibility to make our schools better. We must do better for our children by redesigning the public education system so that no matter what school a child attends, he or she experiences success as a student and as an adult. We have developed a proposal for how we can make our primary schools better. This evening, I will be sharing with you the proposals to introduce parish primary schools. If the proposals are accepted, it will certainly require all of us to work together, to definitely be prepared to make some tough decisions, and to make the much needed change, all of course, based on what is best for all of Bermuda's children. Legislation will be introduced to change our system from a 3-tier system to a 2-tier system as part of education reform. That legislation will result in 2 years being added to the primary school level and 1 year to the senior level. We will also expand the curriculum offerings so that they come on par with the curriculum offerings of the best schools around the world. We want to do that for our children. We know that teaching and learning are at the heart of education. And so we have a very powerful vision for learning that we will share with you this evening. One that is personalized and based on the gifts and the talents and the passions and the interests and the strengths of our children. But we also recognize that we cannot achieve the vision for learning without renovating and refurbishing our existing buildings. You see, our current buildings are not able to accommodate the increase in students and staff that I referenced, the expanded curriculum offerings, which will need to be delivered in purpose-built learning spaces, and the type of teaching and learning experiences that we want for our children and which they deserve. This evening, we will also propose fewer primary schools, 1 per parish, with 2 in Pembroke, to ensure equity and better utilization of our resources. This evening, I will also be sharing the concept for a parish primary school, what the parents and the surrounding community and services can do to help schools to become better. I will also share the factors that we considered to determine the 10 school locations which can be developed to achieve the vision for learning for our children. I'm very excited about what the proposed changes would bring for education, what it would bring for our children, and how these changes can have a positive impact on their future, but also future generations. We believe that our children deserve the best that we can give to them, and we really do. It's time for us to come together to make our schools the best for our children. The first part of the presentation tonight will focus on the reasons for change. Dr. Simmons, our Director of Academics, will share a very powerful vision for learning, and allow you to get some glimpses of what some potential learning spaces could look like. I will talk a bit about the legislation that will be introduced and how it will improve the structure of the Bermuda public school system. I will share the concept of what a parish primary school is, and then end and close off the first part of the presentation by talking about why we need fewer primary schools. There are many who are asking, do we really need to change what's happening in education? And they believe that things should stay as they are. And there are many others who are saying, yes, we definitely do need to change because there's so much to improve. Well, we believe, and our position is that we really do have to transform education and to do it for our children. What we know is that Bermuda's children are brilliant and capable, but unfortunately that is not being reflected in the results because not all of our children are excelling. And we want all children to excel and to succeed. On an ongoing basis, we receive concerns and complaints from our school staff and from our parents who indicate that the services and the programs that are being provided for students are either inadequate or just not meeting their needs. We want to do a better job with the services and programs to improve what is taking place with those areas. Our children have so many diverse needs, and currently we are unable to meet the needs of each and every child. We want to be positioned to meet the needs of all children. When we consider the academic results for our children overall, we do not believe that they reflect what they're capable of, but we're really not satisfied with those results. And we want to improve what we are doing to improve the results. We have to get our children ready for their future. We have to get them ready to compete locally and to compete globally, and they should be positioned to do that now as well as in the future. When we consider the vision for learning and the types of experiences that we want for our children at parish primary schools and the expanded curricula and the specialist rooms in which to deliver those curricula, when we consider the additional students and staff, we recognize that our buildings will not be able to accommodate the vision and what we are proposing for our children. In Plan 2022, there is a statement about parents and the community demanding a transformed education system, and we are responding to those demands. We know that the world has changed. We need to change with it. We need to get our children ready for that change within 21st century learning facilities that will enable them to maximize their potential and prepare for that change. Lastly, we understand and we are aware that there are a notable number of individuals in the community who have a lack of confidence in public education. We want to change that as well. We believe that we need to transform education for Bermuda's children and that we really do need to change. I'm going to invite Dr. Simmons now to share with you the vision for learning and to give you some glimpses of what potential flexible learning spaces can look like for our children moving forward. Dr. Simmons, I'm handing it over to you.
Thank you, Mrs. Richards, and good night to everyone. Once again, with this vision for learning, we're very consistent with what we have presented here as a vision for learning for our students in the future and for our teachers who shall be responsible for delivering this vision for learning. As you see in this chart before you, what we have here, as I indicated before, these are competencies. Some may refer to them as dimensions to learning. Some may refer to them as pillars of learning. We're using and speaking to them in the context of competencies that you would see in 21st century education. Interestingly, you would find in 21st century education, visions for learning, it must be flexible. It must be adaptive. It should obviously be future focused, as it should be full of inspiration for Bermuda's children. Teachers will be expected to be engaging as they want students to engage, be active learners. We want our children to also be thinking in terms of entrepreneurship, not just as consumers, but we want them to be owners. What you also see in the framework here, this concept of culturally relevant. This has been a consistent term posed by the public. They want culturally relevant teaching. And culturally relevant teaching also implies that it be personalized. So our children will have a personalized learning experience. We want them to have a personalized learning experience that looks at what is their interest. And the teacher and the school expected to take them from their interests into a world of innovation and opportunities. With this here comes a certain environment in the classroom. And so with the next 8 slides, it somewhat gives you a concept of the vision. In this first slide, as we have been sharing consistently, all of Bermuda's children in public education, but all of Bermuda's children really should have the experience of classroom outdoors. Because I see some of my former teachers in here, you would know what I'm talking about in terms of the outdoor classroom. When you see the outdoor classroom here where there are garden beds, children are a part of constructing that. This isn't that someone has constructed it for them. They are a part of this construction. But it need not just be outside this classroom. They live on a 21 square mile island. And on this 21 square mile island, our children need to get the full complement of what this island has to offer them. And with it, they must also get the imagination of what it means to travel off this island. I don't mean on a cruise. I don't mean on the plane. I mean, how many of our children surrounded by marine life have the experience of traveling 18 miles, 25 miles off this island? Argus, Challenger Banks, Sargasso Sea. Why not they experience the blue halo, understanding that this is an extension of the 21 square mile island? And if they have the fear of the ocean, that's okay too, because in their world of learning, it is virtual. So those who have that fear, we comfort them. That have the experience of what we're talking about here, of the outdoor classroom, of experiencing in a virtual world. Our children deserve that type of experience, especially given that most of them have a lot of the smart technology now that tells them that this is possible. When we look at the multi-purpose room, especially at the early childhood level, well, this is a classroom that, hey, invites teachers and parents, get down on the level of the children. See the lens of the world as they see it, whether it's in a book they are reading or being read to. But this is where the learning stations and interactive multi-purpose classroom activities begins for these children. But the adults, the adults must have some comfort in roaming and interacting in this particular classroom, where they experience what it means to be engaging in a child's recreational space and learning. As we go to the lower primary classroom, in the lower primary classroom, this is where our children really are beginning to see, okay, some first signs of their personalized learning. Small group interactivity with their peers, small group interactivity with their teachers. That's most important, that they have this type of experience. The traditional classroom has disappeared. The row by row desk and chairs is gone. This is where learning stations take on a new meaning for our children. And you see the round tables and the interactive type of furniture that kids get to move around and engage with. That's the learning space that we want our children in. Not just the colorful codes that you see there before you, but we want them engaging in a learning space that is interactive and mobile, because they are mobile. All of our children deserve an art room. Right now, too many fight for a quality art room. But this represents what a quality art room is, even if our children are not the best artists. But all of them should be allowed at least to express what art means to them. They should be able to construct meaning. And while they may not illustrate something like you see there before you, they should still have the opportunity to use the digital devices. Some of our schools are doing some of that right now, but we don't need some of them. We need all of them having the exposure to the digital devices that teaches them to do something graphically, illustratively, but digitally also. So the art room is such a room where this comes alive. From the art room is the amphitheater. We want our children, and Bermuda's children need to develop a confidence in speaking. And while all classrooms becomes the space where our children should demonstrate and feel confident in their speaking, the amphitheater allows for them to demonstrate it in a bold and more open way. Why can't they have the opportunity? Why shouldn't they be expected to tell us what is the meaning of this drawing, this illustration that you come up with? And if it's not an illustration, it's a public speaking address that they are expected to do. This is literacy, communication, reading, listening. The amphitheater invites this, but it invites in our children a certain confidence and boldness that we will want them to have as they go and compete in the so-called 21st century global society that they are a part of right now. We need to begin to develop this in our children, this sense of confidence. As we talk about the upper classroom, upper primary classroom, well, the beautiful thing about this here is this is not a sit-down classroom for a sit-down teacher. This requires that you be mobile, because students are mobile. It's interactive, it's collaborative, it's communicative, it's cooperative. And when you see the devices of learning that are depicted in this particular photo and graphic, this is interactive technology. This isn't the chalkboard. This isn't the smart board that serves as a marking board. No, this is an interactive device where children begin to manipulate it. And when you think in terms of that picture of that Bermuda map there, imagine that map being broken up into 9 sections, and the kids get to manipulate that and talk about the what if. Hey, why isn't St. Davis 10th parish? No, they should ask that question. Let's use the tools that are available to our children today to stretch their learning and stretch their imagination. And as in this next room, the 3D studio, some people may refer to it or have fabrication laboratories. Some people may call it the maker's room. I like to call it the production room, because all of our children, all of Bermuda's children in learning, public and private, but public education students especially, must know what it means to produce something. And that's not a foreign concept, that they produce something. Where they make something, they produce it. And is it marketable? Is it something that captures their brand? They should have that imagination. If they're working on a float that speaks to their cultural relevance, Is it something that they have constructed? Not something that has been constructed by adults for them, but something that they are a part of, that they construct. Why can't they have it displayed in Bermuda Day or in the agriculture exhibition? This is where we need to push our children with project-based learning, which moves us beyond the standardized learning or standardized assessments that we currently are so familiar with. This moves them to project-based learning. And with it means teachers will have the professional development that equips them with the understanding of what that looks like. And finally, the recreational space. All schools will have a gymnasium, yes, updated, modernized, but the outdoor recreational space isn't just a recreational space of run around play. It's a learning space also. It's a learning space for their motor skills, their gross motor skills. But this is where cooperative and team and collaborative play goes to another level, interactively. So this theme that you hear consistently of interactive, collaborative, cooperative, creative play is very much a part of 21st century education. Our children deserve this in Bermuda. They deserve it now. And we believe that with this vision for learning that we're talking about, our children will know and love Bermuda. They believe in Bermuda and understand what matters to our country, what matters to them, which is very important. Most importantly, they'll be proud to be Bermudian and hopefully understand Bermuda and their place in relationship to the rest of the world. That's what we want our children to come out of a 21 square mile island experience, that the world is here with them going out, not everything coming to them. And so in this vision for learning that we're talking about, it'll have all of the competencies and attributes that we just spoke to. And with it, hopefully, it has an openness and an imagination that you as parents and adults in our community bring to their learning, because you too are key partners. We welcome your questions at the end of this presentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Simmons, for sharing about the vision for learning and for allowing our participants who are online this evening to just get an idea of what some of the future learning spaces could actually look like. We appreciate that. What I would underscore is that we cannot really prepare our children for the future in buildings that were built for an education system and jobs of the past. So we have to really be futuristic in terms of what we are planning for our young people. I'd like to share with everyone the concept of a parish primary school. I would like to begin by talking about the fact that a parish primary school, the concept aligns with the vision for learning. So when we think about effective schools, we know based on the research that effective schools have high levels of parent and community engagement. And there's a growing body of research that makes it very clear that support from outside of the gates and the walls of the school is an essential part in preparing our children for the 21st century. Dr. Simmons talked about the vision for learning and how children need to go outside of the school walls and outside of the school gates. That is going to be important for our young people. It is important for them to find meaning and relevance in their learning. And that will occur when they have the opportunity to go out into the surrounding neighborhood, into the surrounding businesses to connect their learning with real, authentic environments. So imagine for a moment where each school is the hub of their parish. And everyone in the parish, the surrounding neighborhood, the parents, those individuals in the neighborhood and the community who don't have children, the businesses and the services, and where everyone channels their energy into helping the school and the children to be successful. Imagine where the partners are engaged in the daily operations and the learning experiences and the programs of the children, where community partners are providing professional development and resources and services, not just to staff and students, but also there's outreach to the parents. Now, some people will say that that already exists, and I would disagree. I would say that there are pockets of it, or it's sporadic. There are schools which receive donations once a year, and there are persons from the community who may go into the schools once per term to do activities for children, or who may do something for the teachers once per term or once per month. But what we are talking about is setting up an infrastructure which will enable the parish community partners, the parents, those in the neighborhood, to really integrate with the learning experiences, the operations of the school. What we envision is the parish rallying together and taking ownership for the success of children, indicating they belong to us. We're going to invest in them. We're going to give the time to help them to succeed, and we will accept responsibility for their success and for their well-being. Our schools are expected to prepare children for a very complex, a very rapidly changing world. So in addition to teaching subject content like language and math and reading and writing and science and the vocational courses that we expect to see in our schools in the future, schools also have to help children to become information and media literate. They have to teach them to become creative thinkers and critical thinkers and problem solvers, individuals who are curious and who are asking why all the time because they want to know more. Schools are responsible for helping children to become excellent communicators and to know how to be team players. They're expected to teach them to be environmentally aware and to be civically responsibility and to really acquire other transferable skills that they can take into adulthood. While our schools cannot be expected to do it alone, in fact, they cannot do it alone, it really will take a parish to help our schools to be successful moving forward. There will be legislative changes brought forward that will improve the Bermuda public school system. The legislation will phase out middle schools. It will establish senior level signature schools. And this is a very exciting concept for our children because there will be signature pathways or signature foci, areas where they can focus on based on what they're interested in, their passions and their strengths. And so I'm really excited that there's an opportunity where they will be able to delve more into those subjects of interest. The legislation will also establish an exceptionalities signature school, and this school would be for the students who are at Dame. The legislation will also establish an alternative education signature school, and that signature school will be for children who require a special environment because they have social emotional needs that have to be met. There may be behavioral needs that have to be met, but also we're talking about a new concept for an alternative education school that will also afford parents another option. Parents who say, I would like to have, like for my children to have an alternative experience. And so there will be opportunities for that. The legislation will change the system from a 3-tier system, primary, middle, and senior, to a 2-tier system, primary and senior. And in doing so, this will result in the primary schools going from primary 1 to primary 8. Part of the vision also involves having preschools on the same site as our primary schools, or actually attached or a part of the primary schools. This will assist in students lessening the number of transitions that students will have to make during their education. So right now, a student will transition from home into a preschool. A student will transition from a preschool into a primary school. A student would transition from primary into middle, and then middle into senior. So we're looking at 4 transitions. And we know the research around transitions indicates that it presents challenges for many children. So what we're looking at with this structure as well is when a student enters at the preschool level, the next transition would come after the student finishes P8 and goes into the senior signature level. And so the legislation that is brought forward will establish these structures, but also improve the Bermuda public school system. For the last portion of this presentation, I'd just like to take a few moments to share with you why we need fewer primary schools. There is a trend of decreasing numbers of children enrolling in public schools. There are also data to indicate that there is a decline in the birth rate. Those trends are projected to continue. I shared with you, Dr. Simmons shared with you the vision for learning and the types of learning experiences that we want for our children. I talked about the expansion of the curriculum and how those curricula would need to be delivered in specialist rooms, the additional staff, the additional students. And so our current facilities cannot support the new vision of what we want for our children. We also want equity across all of our primary schools, and we don't have that now. We ideally would like to shift to where we can deploy our resources based on the demographics of each school. We believe that if we take the resources that we have, that is allocated for 18 schools, channel those resources into 10 schools, we can better distribute the resources, better utilize them, and help those schools to become the very best that they can be for our children. Ms. Trott, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you so much for that, Commissioner. At this time, we're going to go to some questions. So the first question that came through is, how will the history of the closed school be preserved? I know the minister spoke on that briefly in his opening remarks, but if there are any plans, could you share them with us?
You know, and I'll take that question, and I think perhaps Dr. Simmons can opine on that as well. It's something that needs to be developed. And I know, I remember when I first had this conversation with someone before the consultation started, and I said, you know, why don't we? And they presented me with the history of one of our schools, a very extensive history, and I was overly impressed. And I said, you know, this is worthy. We need to really pull our heads together and figure out how we can record this history and perhaps even strike together a committee of historians and persons interested in that to see how we can preserve this and what can go into our parish schools if that proposal is the way that we go, and how we can have places within there that people can go and see all of this information. So, I mean, this is a work in progress, but it is something that I can wholeheartedly say that we are committed to doing, and it has to be done. It needs to be done. You know, this story is critically important to more than just the persons on this call. They're important to all of Bermuda, and it's something that we have to figure out a way to do and do it properly and do our schools, all of our schools, the proper justice.
Thank you for that, Minister. The next question is, how will preschools be affected? Lagoon Park is currently at the Somerset Primary School location.
Thank you to our participant for that question. The vision is to have 10 parish schools. We currently have 10 preschools. Our vision involves having preschools either on the same site or connected to or in the same building as the primary schools so that they become a part of that experience and we reduce the number of transitions.
Thank you for that clarity. Where will the students go while building or renovating the schools?
That is something that, first of all, the timeframes is probably very critically important for us to discuss here. The only timeframes that we have is the creation of 2 signature schools to be implemented in September 2022. And then once those signature schools are in place, the transition plan to get us to where we are now to where we want to go will be in the works. And so we anticipate there will not be any movement, significant movement for perhaps for 2 to 3 years. That'll be how long it would take for the transition plan to occur after those 2 senior signature schools are in place. Remember, we're not only just talking about the transition from primary schools, the primary school proposal we have today. We're also talking about the transition to creating signature schools, the other signature schools that we are talking about. We intend to have 5 of them as high schools and 2 of them as special schools, special signature schools, and then the transition from the primary schools to, if the proposal we're talking about, the closure of schools, the renovation of schools, the movement of students to those schools, that is something that will take place over the course of several years. And so, but we do commit to ensure that prior to any of that beginning, there will be plenty of lead time given to our parents, given to our students, because the most important thing here is to ensure that our students' education is disrupted as least as possible as we move towards education reform.
Thank you for that, Minister. I see that we have some participants with their hands up on Zoom. So the first person that I'm going to go to is Ms. Karen Joins. If you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
I'm sorry, that was a mistake.
It was? Okay.
Yes.
That's fine. No problem.
No problem.
Ms. Brock, Arlene Brock, I see you have your hand up. Is that a question?
It's a comment.
A comment?
Maybe there's a question. First of all, thank you very much. It's so nice to see so many of you safe and sound. I would like to thank you for the evident hard work that you did on that consultation document and on this process. I think that the document, and certainly Mrs. Richards a few minutes ago, were both very eloquent about the need for the parish school. It is a welcome and wonderful concept. And I'm not going to quote back to you what the consultation document says, but clearly the key feature of the parish school is having this incredible hub where parents, communities, businesses, et cetera, contribute to the school. You use the word rally around the school, and therefore create this more connected and resilient community, supporting the learning and wellness of the students, especially those students with disadvantage. And I think that that sets up, for me, sort of the values criterion for how you make decisions about the schools. It's a qualitative set of criteria of what you're expecting and aspiring these wonderful parish schools to be. And so I'm a little concerned, however, that the criterion in this particular case in the West End of choosing Somerset Primary rather than West End as the site of the school is a criterion that has very little to do with those values. It's rather a criterion that I would call numbers or quantitative criterion. And, I went through the scoring process and, obviously, the schools are old, the facilities need to be upgraded, there are costs, there's resources, there's falling enrollment, and a lot of other financial pressures and constraints. So I appreciate all of that. And the scoring system seems to have taken all of that into account. But what I find a bit difficult to reconcile is that on the one hand, you aspire to this wonderful parish school with certain values of the community. But on the other hand, the decision about which school becomes that parish school is based entirely on the scoring system. Had the scoring system included the community and qualitative value, values, then it would have made more sense. And I don't think I'd be alone in thinking that had those values criterion been included in the scoring system, West End would probably have a value of 30, and Somerset Primary, given its horrific history, would have had a value of 1. And then instead of being 5 points behind, West End might have had more points, and then that would have been a great basis for recommending West End. But in the consultation document, the recommendation seems to have been based entirely on the numbers. And I'm not personally going to quibble with sort of boundaries and bus routes and how can greenfield space be mitigated and all of that. I leave that to others who are much more qualified to quibble about that. So my concern is when we are making decisions, what are the criterion that we're using? And are those criteria, in fact, the ones that are supporting the or supportive of or reflected in the entire vision, which I think is an excellent vision. And the last thing I want to say in this regard is what I find a bit ironic is that the school that you aspire to, or that we, it's not you, it's all of us concerned about Bermuda and about the education system. And let me just say, I was thoroughly against the middle school concept when it was introduced. I didn't think that was appropriate for our size. So I'm very glad to see you reverting to a different concept. But what I find a bit ironic is that the school that we want to have in the parish is the school that West End has been for generations in the Sandys Parish. So West End has been that school that people rallied around, parents, neighborhood, community, Somerset Cricket Club, everybody rallied around that school. People went there for things beyond reading, writing, and arithmetic. And while I recognize that the school loses out incredibly to Somerset Primary and things like existing land and expansion capability, although I'm not quite sure what the definition of that is. I almost feel, and I'm sorry to use these words, please accept my apologies, but I almost feel that the school that generations of families have committed funds to, their personal funds, they were not wealthy people who put sweat equity into that school, who built the community, that those people and those generations in this school is being punished for being the hub that you aspire to, or we aspire to. Whereas the school that, even if you look at it today, even if you look at the fact that it's sort of closed and surrounded, enclave with the walls and the bushes, even if we look at the history, it was an exclusionary school. And then when integration came about, whites fled the school, and it was never a part of the hub of the Sandys community. And we all know the history, that the reason some of the facilities there are better is that they've had this systematic and systemic privileging and preferences for the school. I just recently learned the story that at some point new desks had been approved for West End, but the new desks went to Somerset Primary, and then West End got their old desks. I didn't know that story, but the school that was anti-hub and anti-parish concept is the school that somehow feels like it's being rewarded. And I personally think that the physical aspects, those important numbers criteria, those can be managed. And you can manage with technology things like space and so forth, but you can't manage insult. You can't manage dismissing and jettisoning a whole community history and legacy. And I must make a confession as I end. And my confession is that I feel, and I could be entirely wrong, and I don't want to misquote anybody, but I feel that I've heard a view that has already been formed, that Legacy need not be attached to a physical space or building. And that may be true. I don't know. I don't know if you have research about that. I don't know if the Howard Academy and Bermuda Technical Institute legacies have been preserved beyond the memories of the people who attended them. We have a more recent example, the Berkeley Institute. I don't know if, to what extent, notwithstanding that most of the principals were graduates of Berkeley, I don't know to what extent that legacy has been preserved. And so my question, I do have a question. So my question is, if we can avoid losing or dismissing the legacy of the space, which holds within it the legacy of the community hub that we would like to achieve, and that was in many ways already achieved by West End School. If we can avoid dismissing that legacy, culture, and community, shouldn't we? Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Ms. Brock. We do have some questions that have come through. Ms. Ellen Kate Horton has asked, do we have plans to close the Warwick preschool? So maybe we can speak to if we do have plans for preschools overall.
Thank you so much for that question. I can say that we will have discussions with our educators and our leaders around how we will develop the Purvis as a parish primary school.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. Has it been determined what needs of the students aren't being met? And if so, what are they?
Thank you. I can share just some in general. So when we start to look at our children and their academic performance, so the academic needs, we have to do a better job meeting the academic needs, the social, emotional. Our students also need services such as OT, occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy. So there are needs there as well. We have children who have been assessed and who are considered gifted, and we need to do a better job of meeting their needs. So those are just some of the needs that are not presently being met in the way that they should for our children, and in a way that, and they deserve to have those needs met.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. I'm going to go to, it's a question slash, more so a comment, but it says a large barrier to student performance is student attitude. A new building will not fix that until we as a society show that we value education. So Commissioner or the Minister or Dr. Simmons, do you have any feedback for that comment?
Well, I welcome a statement like that. The person is absolutely correct. And obviously they must observe something, that we are in a country where many of us do not value education. And it goes with some of the values that Ms. Bruck spoke to earlier. So the person is right on point. We have to value education. And while buildings alone, are not the answer, what is the value each person in here places on their child's education? What is your investment? And that goes with how you support your institutions.
Thank you for that.
To answer that question now, I think we're all on the same page of placing value for our education and our children's education.
And repeat it. She said so many good things, right? But if you can just repeat that question, and then I'll see if Dr. Simmons can go ahead and answer that for you.
I apologize for talking so long. The question was, the premise of the question first is that physical things change over time. They can be managed. Technology can allow us to make better use of space, etc. We may have a smaller field at West End, but we can change the way it's used. So those things can be managed. the community, the legacy, the culture, the generations of a relatively stable community, Sandy's is in terms of families, those can't be changed in the same way. So my question was, if we can avoid dismissing, disrespecting, and losing the culture, the legacy, by keeping the school, West End, as the parish school and the parish hub, then shouldn't we?
You want me to answer that, or you want the minister? Because that's partially, I have an answer to that question or to that statement.
Please go ahead, Dr. Simmons.
Well, should we preserve? Well, again, in the context of the proposal, this is still open for discussion, number one. Two, interesting in terms, and I appreciate Ms. Brock's dissertation on this subject matter. I would go as far to say that we have a history of some of this, already. It isn't just the West End community. We can ask the question also, why is it members of the West, not even the surrounding community of West End, choose to go to Somerset Primary? We can ask the question of, and I think Ms. Brock alluded to it, a Somerset Primary that was predominantly white post or pre-1972 changed between 1972 and 82 in a quick 10 years. Why? Because Bowes Island students who were Somerset children, the great percentage of them, who couldn't go to a West End, and parents chose not to go to Sands Grammar, but in 72, when they integrated, took over, and that's what has happened, they've taken over, because Somerset Primary now is a predominantly Black school, benefiting from, yes, a trust that was set up by its past benefactors, still overseen by many of the people who taught at the school or teach at the school now. So it's an if. And while this is still a proposal that's wide open, this is, I think, the subject matter that is on the floor is an important subject matter. No one dismisses a West End history. I didn't go to West End, but I know its history very well through relatives who attended. I know the battles of rivalries in Somerset on the legacies of schools. Bowes Island no longer exists, but its legacy is still very much alive with many of the people who went there to this day. But many of them have taken over, have owned ownership of Somerset Primary, and they'll tell you that. We weren't welcome in it in the beginning, but 72, when it was the government's decision to integrate Sands Grammar or Somerset Primary, there was no decision of where you were going. Everyone, the great majority went to Somerset Primary. And there were some who went to West End, but the great majority went Somerset Primary. The legacy of that right now is the offspring, the children of the parents and the grandparents who went Bowes Island are the people who continue to go there, in addition to those who on the boundaries of West End who walk past the school and go to Somerset Primary. These are part of the community discussion that we must have. So the if is an if for the probability based upon whether or not, how far what comes out of this proposal. I think it's important questions. I think it's important things we must answer. Legacy follows people. And that's been the history of it in the West End of the island when it comes to schooling. I'm not even gonna bring up saying secondary school. That has land attached to it that they own. Partial now. That they didn't manage fully and lost some of it. These are all part of our discussions in the West End when you talk about our legacies. but it's a welcome discussion for this community. And I saw an earlier conversation, if we took away Allen Temple and Somerset Cricket Club, if you take away Allen Temple and St. James Church, a whole community loses its identity, literally. They own the land, and those steeples are very much a part of the psyches and the families that go there. So it's an important discussion to be continued.
Thank you for that response, Dr. Simmons. A question is, as teachers define what is actually needed to improve performance, and will there be a continued effort to include them and give proper weight to their needs and concerns?
Thank you so much for the question, Ms. Trott. I'm just trying to capture the first part is what role did the teachers play?
Yes.
In terms of?
Identifying what is actually needed to improve performance.
Thank you again. I have to go back to what we are working to do on behalf of Bermuda, and I have to reference Plan 2022, which is the strategic plan for education, and the process that was used to develop that plan, which included the inputs of, I think, if I quote correctly, over 3,000 pieces of feedback coming in. So Plan 2022 is considered to be Bermuda's plan, what parents indicated they want for their children. And so when we begin to share the vision for learning, we share the concept of the parish school and taking children outside of the school and engaging in authentic experiences. And we talk about wanting to have our own services and our own bus fleet, etc. That's all of that is being pulled from Plan 2022. So we are really operationalized, or we're bringing to life what Bermudians said they want for their children. The plan talks about different type of pedagogy and instruction where we're shifting to inquiry, we're shifting to problem-based learning, we're shifting to looking at wraparound services for children. So again, when you talk about what role did teachers play in terms of this vision, what we're sharing, we're executing what has been stepped out in Plan 2022. Now, as we go to develop and execute the strategies to bring the vision and the ideas to life, the input not only of teachers and educators and school leaders will be sought, but community, persons from the community and parents and specialists. So the same way that the plan was developed with this collaborative effort, we will, as we sort of flesh out what we have to do, we will collaborate and involve others as well. We have to bring everyone into developing, the vision further and what will take place within schools if, and I say if because we're proposing this, if it's happened, and we're proposing it, and there are opportunities for other ideas to be placed on the table. I think there was another part to the question.
Just moving forward, if they'll continue to be involved, but I think you did just answer
our
that.
Teachers are, and our school leaders, we consider them to be the experts in their areas. And so when we consider what will take, when you heard me talk about the expanding the curriculum, and the curriculum would have to be delivered in specialist classrooms. Well, the pedagogy, so the instruction, the assessment, and all of that, the teachers and leaders have to have input and views that are brought forward with respect to that.
Thank you so much, Commissioner.
You're certainly welcome.
And I just want to remind participants that in addition to your comments, if you do choose to formalize them, we are accepting alternative proposals. We have placed a link in the chat that you can go ahead and upload written submissions to. We'll also post it onto our Facebook page so that you can see that. At this time, I am going to go to our poll for the first part of this presentation, and then we'll get.
Just one moment before you go to the poll, and I do apologize for interrupting, but I just wanted to acknowledge Ms. Brock, and your comments were quite profound, and will be taken into account. I know what you said was said as a comment with a question at the end that was answered, but I just wanted to acknowledge that I thought what you said was quite profound. And you said, and when you talked about adding, if we had added another category for historical context, it is something that we are grappling with, and we understand the emotive and the attachment that we are dealing with, not just in Sands Parish, but in all of our parishes. We've had similar conversations with all of our people, but I do want us to, and I acknowledge what you said about, where West End being the hub of the community, and it's something that we will take into account. I just wanted to add to that while I fully appreciate the legacy. I mean, I attended a primary school. My daughter attended that primary school. My family attended a primary school that is well over a century in terms of history, well over a century of historical narrative behind it. And that is one of the schools that is being suggested to be potentially moved or used for something else. So this is not something, and I want all of us to understand, this is not something that is only affecting our fellow citizens in Sands Parish. This is something that's going to affect all of our citizens. But I do truly want us to recognize and understand that what we're proposing and what we're looking to do takes our children's needs in first and foremost into effect. And then we try and juxtapose all the rest of the things on top of that. So with that, I just wanted to acknowledge what you said and didn't want you to think that it was we listened and we just kind of went past it. It was profound, and it was taken, and it will be taken into account as we move forward.
Thank you, Minister. And I also want to make sure that you all know that I fully believe and appreciate that the decision makers have the best interest of the students at heart and of the communities.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So at this time, we are going to take a poll just to capture your sentiments of the presentation thus far. So you will see it come onto your screen. And the poll is, do you agree with the introduction of parish primary schools with 1 primary school per parish and 2 in Pembroke? Just gonna give it a few more seconds. So if you can just let us know yes, no, or if you are not sure.
Can you repeat the question, please, for one of the participants?
Okay, so the poll question is, do you agree with the introduction of parish primary schools with 1 primary school per parish and 2 in Pembroke Parish? Okay, so the results are in. So we had 184%. Is that supposed to be 84%? Yeah, I don't know. It says 184% of people said yes.
That's an error.
Yeah.
It does appear to be an error.
Okay.
When people are doing it on multiple.
Okay. So yeah, well, we had 12% that said no and 20% that were unsure. So at this time, we're going to go into the second part of the conversation, and we're going to hand it over to Commissioner Richards, and there will be an opportunity for questions at the end of this. So please continue to engage with us in the chat.
Thank you so much again, Ms. Trott. And I'd like to move us to the second part of the presentation, and where we will zoom in on the specific proposals for the parish primary schools. And I will share the study factors that were used to decide which primary school locations should be refurbished or rebuilt. I would like to begin by saying that we do have a vision to have a 21st century learning facilities or buildings for our children. And we do need that in order to execute or realize the vision, the new vision for learning that we have for the expansion of the curriculum that we are also proposing and considering. If you look to the left-hand side of your screen, you will see a list of 4 broad study factors: existing building conditions, land and property conditions, safety and health, and transportation. When we considered the factors for the locations, specific study factors such as the age of buildings was considered, the electrical and the plumbing conditions, whether there were any boundary restrictions or zoning restrictions as well. As we considered the concept of the surrounding of the parish primary school, the surrounding community services were also looked at, in addition to the proximity to the road or the bus route. We looked at site access and whether there was potential for traffic congestion as well. Now, safety and accessibility are also important study factors. And because the data already existed for safety and accessibility for our schools, and that data were included in the school report, the data from the school report were factored in for safety and accessibility. The environmental building conditions were also considered. And these last 2 study factors were extremely important, whether there was expansion capacity. When we think about the need to either have a preschool on site, to expand the curricular, and then to therefore develop the building to have these purpose-built rooms for delivering the curricular. We're looking to have purpose-built rooms for teachers to plan, a parent resource. And so there has to be expansion capacity, at the respective locations. And then also, once there has been expansion, we do have to ensure that there's sufficient green field space for outdoor recreational areas for preschool, lower primary, upper primary, as well as a robust outdoor sports program. So after our technical professionals scored, we're proposing 10 redesigned, refurbished, or a newly built parish primary school with 1 primary school per parish and 2 in Pembroke, and to continue with enrollment by zone. So we presently have our schools spread across, our 18 schools spread across our 9 parishes, and we are proposing to have 10 schools spread across the 9 parishes. So in just a moment, I'm going to start to drill down and look at the specific parish proposals, but I will leave, even though I'm going to start with the Western Zone and Sands Parish is in the Western Zone, I will leave Sands Parish to the end. So let's start in the Western Zone, and let's take a look at Southampton Parish. In Southampton Parish, we have 3 primary schools: Heron Bay Primary, Port Royal Primary, and Delton E. Tucker Primary. Delton E. Tucker is the recommended parish primary school. It received the highest score of the three. It outscored the other two primary schools for sites for land and property. It does have the acreage for development. It has the capacity for expansion, and the Southampton preschool is adjacent to Delton E. Tucker. So we're therefore proposing Delton E. Tucker as the parish school for Southampton, and we would propose to close Port Royal Primary and Heron Bay Primary. Purvis Primary is the only school in its parish, and we propose to develop Purvis Primary as a parish primary school. In the central area, we'll start with Pembroke. We're proposing two parish primary schools for Pembroke. The Victor Scott Primary and West Pembroke Primary are the recommended parish primary schools because they receive the highest scores. Both schools have the acreage and the land potential for expansion. Victor Scott already accommodates a preschool, and West Pembroke has the potential for a preschool. Northlands has land boundary restrictions, limited potential for expansion. So we propose Victor Scott Primary and West Pembroke Primary as the parish schools for Pembroke, and we therefore propose to close Northlands Primary. When we consider Paget Primary, we have two schools in Paget Primary, in Paget Parish. We have Paget Primary and we have Gilbert Institute. Now, Paget Primary is the recommended parish primary school. It scored almost double in the weighted scores for land and property conditions than Gilbert Institute. And for those of you who know the area where Paget Primary is located, you will know that you have the school building, you have the play area and the field, but behind the field is significant acreage for expansion. So we therefore propose Paget Primary as the parish school for Paget, and we propose to close Gilbert Institute. Now, when we consider Devonshire Parish, we are considering the schools in Devonshire Parish within the context of a larger vision for education. We believe and we know that we have to do a better job of meeting the needs of children who have exceptionalities, children who have special needs to be met. We also know that we have to do a better job with meeting the needs for students who require an alternative. And so for Devonshire, we're proposing a new build for the parish school, and we're proposing to repurpose both Prospect Primary and Elliott Primary. As it relates to Prospect Primary, we are proposing to repurpose the school as an exceptionality signature school to serve the children who attend Dame and to serve as the new location for the K. Margaret Carter Center, and in time to provide additional special education services for students with exceptionalities. For Elliott Primary, we propose to close Elliott Primary School and to repurpose it as the alternative education signature school to service students with social, emotional, and behavioral needs and other alternative needs. And again, this signature school would cater to students from across the island. So we propose a new build for Devonshire, and we propose to close both Prospect and Elliott and to repurpose them as signature schools. For the Eastern Zone, Francis Patton and Harrington Sound are the only schools in their respective parishes. We propose to develop them as parish primary schools. In St. George's Parish, we have 3 primary schools: East End Primary, St. David's Primary, and St. George's Preparatory. East End Primary is the recommended parish school location as it achieved the highest score, especially for land and property. Out of the 3 schools, the East End school location has the highest potential for development, especially for the vision for learning. And so we therefore propose we propose East End Primary as the parish primary school for St. George's, and we therefore propose to close St. David's Primary and St. George's Preparatory schools. So let's now take a look at Sands Parish. We have our 2 schools as we've been discussing in Sands Parish. We have both Somerset Primary and we have West End Primary. And when we look at some of the key study factors, we can see for the existing land and the use, whether the land is usable or has any zoning matters, we can see that Somerset Primary had the higher score of the 2 schools. When we consider the boundaries and whether there were any development restrictions, again, Somerset Primary had the higher score of the 2 schools. When we considered the amount of greenfield space, Somerset Primary had the higher of the 2 schools. And when we considered expansion capacity, again, Somerset Primary had the higher score of the 2 schools. So currently, as we stated, we have West End and Somerset Primary. Somerset Primary is the proposed parish school. It received the higher overall score of the 2 schools. It has large available acreage, the capacity for development expansion to accommodate up to 300 students plus the additional staff, a large playing field, sufficient outdoor space, and it already has a preschool on its site. So we therefore propose Somerset Primary as the parish primary school for Sands, and we would propose to close West End Primary. Now, we do recognize that the changes will impact our students, the changes will impact our staff as well, and we also know that what we are proposing is very sensitive. Our students who are at schools that are recommended for closures, if the proposal is accepted, would have to transfer to other schools. They may even have to travel further, and there are other factors to consider with our students as well. We know that the roles of staff will be different in the vision that we're proposing. Teaching will be different, roles will be different. There will be opportunity for new roles as well if the proposal is accepted. I do want to reassure our educators and our leaders that the government and the ministry are committed to undertaking a very fair, a very transparent process on how to best staff our schools within the proposed new structure if it is accepted. And I would underscore as well that as we consider that structure for how the process for how to best staff our schools, that we will give our school leaders, we will give our teachers and our educators an opportunity to have an input into that process. I just want to end by sharing some of the key features that the proposed school locations had in common. They could be expanded and developed to accommodate the new vision for learning, to accommodate up to 300 students and the additional staff when you think of the expansion capacity for the additional rooms, having a preschool on site, and there would also still be lots of green space for the outdoor recreational areas for lower primary, upper primary, as well as a robust outdoor sports program. So Mrs. Trott, I'm going to hand it back to you at this time.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. Let's get into some more questions. So we've had some really good questions come through. The first one that I'm going to go to is what is being done to address the identified needs of students that aren't being met right now? surely students' needs shouldn't be neglected until we get new buildings.
Thank you to our participant for that question. It is a very important one. So what processes, what do we have in place? Right now, we have a process called or system called the multi-tiered system of support, which we are working to strengthen. And so that process involves reviewing the data around student performance, academic data related to their performance with their courses, their reading, any social emotional needs that they have to have met, again, the therapeutic needs of children. And so you have a cross section of the school team who come together to consider the needs of each of those students, and then they put plans in place to address the needs of the children.
Thank you, Commissioner. And we had a question come through in the Zoom chat that says, what are the community services that were taken into account?
Thank you again for the question. We would be looking at any of the organizations and services in the respective areas.
Thank you. And this question, it's two parts, but the first part, is the current performance of students representative as a lack of these 21st century ideas, or are they struggling with basic educational principles? If it is the latter, is there a plan for 21st century curriculum that is aligned with new standards and textbooks, digital or physical, for both students and teachers?
It's a very long question, Ms. Trott. Again, you're going to have to, when the questions are long like that, you're going to have to break it down for us. I did hear something around curriculum, and I believe Dr. Simmons can answer, but the first part was around student performance.
So it says, is the current performance of students representative as a lack of these 21st century ideas, or are they struggling with basic educational principles?
That's a good question. Ms. Richards, you want to answer? I mean, that's a very good question.
I can, Dr. Simmons, answer this portion, and then if you can provide the response to curriculum, because we want to ensure that we are answering all aspects of the question. When we consider the performance of children, we recognize that there are a number of factors that are impacting our students' performance. There's a lot of research to indicate the factors that do impact performance. But when we consider our students, first of all, we have a diverse student population. They come with many, many needs. And as shared on the first slide, we're not meeting the needs of all of our children. So when students' needs are not met as they should be met, they don't perform at their optimum. You would have heard Dr. Simmons talk about the need to personalize the learning. So we're talking about a shift in the type of pedagogy, a shift in the type of instruction, the way that teaching takes place. We know without a shadow of doubt that there is a direct correlation between the teaching that takes place and the outcomes of children. We know there's a direct correlation between the leadership of schools and the outcomes of the schools. We also know that there are many factors that impact student performance. There are home factors, there are school factors, there may be social emotional factors. We are taking the research into consideration, and we believe that what we are proposing will help our children to improve in terms of their learning, improve their attainment, improve the outcomes for our students.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. And Dr. Simmons, is there a plan for 21st century curriculum that is aligned with the new standards and textbooks, both digital or physical, for both teachers and students?
To answer the question, yes, there's a plan. And even as we speak all this week, and actually for the past few months, really, there's a team of people who are revisioning, reimagining the curriculum, reconceptualizing the curriculum, right? And if you see what we spoke to and shared in terms of the vision for learning, those competencies, that's very much a part of the vision that we have for curriculum. Normally people will ask, well, couldn't some of those things be in the current curriculum? Yes, they can. As a matter of fact, we have the curriculum that we deliver. While it may be Cambridge, it's a student-centered curriculum, but it's delivered in a teacher-centered way. That's a problem. So what we know and what we're learning with what we currently have and what we will need to do with what we are reimagining is equip our teachers with the professional development, the training, all of that, with the resources, the tools. You can't deliver a 21st century education without using digital tools. And that was spoken to in terms of some of the things when we talked about the 3D studio and the art room. And no, we want the technology. We want our children, they deserve to have that technology in their hands. They deserve to experience what a virtual learning experience is. All right, these are things that are going on now. But we want all of our schools, all of our children have the same access to these tools, to these resources for 21st century education. So to answer the question again, no, there will be some revision, some reimagining of the curriculum.
Thank you, Dr. Simmons. The next question that came in via Menti is speech, language, pathology, and occupational therapy fall under health, and primary schools are serviced more so than those at middle and high. So the two-part question, the first part, how is the new plan going to change that? And then the second part is, are there plans to increase the number of SLP and OT professionals?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I appreciate that question because the vision that we have moving forward would be for each of our schools to have those services provided by staff who fall under education. As our participant has stated, they presently are under another ministry, but we want to have the persons who are going to give those services available readily on hand and to give the services as students need them. So that's going to be very important as we move forward. The question was, with the vision, would there be an increase? Earlier, I talked about the need to determine the services and the resources based on the demographics of the school. So when we consider the students in the school and what those needs are, then those needs would determine the number of individuals who would be providing services. So I hope that helps.
Understandable. Thank you so much for that response. The next question that came in via Menti is, where in the report is the ministry holding parents and the community accountable for student performance? It seems that a lot of pressure is placed on teachers, but teachers are overwhelmed dealing with social issues that have made their way into the class.
Where in the report are we holding the community and parents accountable?
For student performance, yes.
Thank you to our participant for the question. Accountability is extremely important at all levels and with all partners. It is important at our school site, and as the teacher or the participant said, that school staff are held accountable. And absolutely, the Department of Education is held accountable, and we should be held accountable. But as we look to increase the engagement of our parents and our community, we are looking to set up infrastructures that will help us to bring them into the processes that are taking place into our school. I believe we also have a responsibility when we talk about holding parents accountable. We have to ensure that our parents know, once we step out what we want to hold them accountable for, we're going to have to equip our parents. So there's going to have to be an education piece. We can't hold parents accountable for doing things with their children if they don't have the skills and the knowledge to do that. So part of what we are considering as well is the parent education piece, as it relates to bringing them in, engaging them, educating them around, what it is their role is, and then holding them accountable for following through with that. And the community, I think that's a really interesting part to it. How do we hold the community accountable with the vision that we're proposing? And of course, we have to sort of disaggregate it and determine, what we will need to bring that to realize it. But when we talk about the community and bringing them in and helping them to take ownership, with that comes some accountability as well. So I really appreciate this particular question that has been asked, and it raises additional food for thought, particularly as it relates to how do we hold the community accountable? Because Bermuda's children are all of our children. We're all responsible for them. And so what structures can be put in place to hold the community accountable in different ways? And I touched on some of that with the parish primary school concept, giving their services and providing resources and investing in schools. That's a form of accountability as well. So thank you for your question. And I hope at least I gave some food for thought in my response.
Ms. Richards, may I add to your response in that question, because it is a very significant and important question.
It is.
And it is an important question that also brings into this model that we're talking about the accountability, the responsibility of the parish councils. These are parish schools, and there are parish councils in every parish who service the same community of the school. So there are different sides of the coin, but we're serving the same community. And I believe that this is a great opportunity to really build upon what true community wealth can become. Not what it can look like, what it can become. Because now your parish councils really have a responsibility that can be measured with their partnership with their parish school and the extended families who are a part of that school. All of that goes with building not just a legacy of a school, but a legacy of a parish. So your parish council is very much a part of the community wealth building. And that's a concept that we must bring into this education reform that we're talking about. This isn't just building new schools and putting new curricula in parishes. This is about community wealth building.
Thank you for that. Those were great in-depth responses. I'm going to go to the next question that came in via Facebook. It says, has any thought been given into combining Somerset Primary and West End campuses? This would allow space for renovation, but also quite possibly remove some of the more urgent building needs to make Somerset Primary large enough to accommodate additional year levels. So I guess the main question would be, has any thought been given into combining Somerset Primary and West End campuses?
I think I can start that off, and the commissioner and Dr. Simmons can weigh in as they see fit. The purpose of this proposal that we've come up with is, one, we recognize that virtually none of our buildings are fit for service right now. All of them need extensive work. We do a good job of patching them up during the summer to get them ready for the upcoming school year. And what we're finding is each year those repairs are becoming increasingly more difficult to accomplish within the summer works, based on just the fact that the buildings are that old. They contain building techniques and substances that are not allowed in buildings I'm not even going to say 21st century, 20th century in most cases. And so the idea of having two campuses defeats the very purpose of what we're trying to accomplish here. Right now, you're looking at between those two campuses, barely 200 children. barely 200 children between those two campuses that can easily be accommodated on one campus. But the fact that we're trying to expand our school to take into account potential future growth within our country, we need a campus that can accommodate 300 students comfortably, as well as a campus that can accommodate, as the commissioner pointed out, the preschool, on-site, all of the things that we feel are necessary for a 21st century campus. Whether we're talking about playing fields, whether we're talking about playgrounds, outdoor classrooms, gardens, adequate parking, so there isn't to reduce traffic stresses, expansion capabilities of the particular buildings to bring them up to today's building code. And so when we look at that, and one of the things we also the commission also mentioned was the removal of transitions. This is one of the reasons of trying to have the preschools on site with the primary schools as well, to reduce those transitions that we're looking at now. So the idea of having split campuses for this purpose actually is contrary to what we are proposing. What we are proposing as we talk about this. And I know there's been a question that's floated around on her as well, and I did want to just make note of it, and it asked about the size, the actual lot sizes of the two schools. I wanted to let the public know that Sands, the property that the current Sands Primary School occupies now is just under 5 acres of space. And the property that West End Primary currently occupies is 3.5 acres of space. And so that's why you saw in some of those slides that the commissioner showed, there was such a difference in percentages of the points when it was talking about the actual space concerns and ability to expand. And so I believe I'm trying to answer the question the best way I can. It's just not. It doesn't seem in taking in the direction that we feel that our education system should be going in, to try and completely renovate two campuses when one campus can actually do the job. And I don't know if Dr. Simmons or Ms. Richards wishes to add to that.
Thank you, Minister. No, that's fine.
Okay.
So a question for you, Minister. It says, why can't the ministry bite the bullet and allow West End to be the preferred school? Culture is important for all Sands community.
Okay, I'm not sure what they mean by bite the bullet. What we're looking at, again, is what's best for what we're trying to have for our children. And so we could also look at that from the other direction. Why couldn't we bite the bullet and say that Somerset is the better campus to develop and go that route? So it actually goes, but it's a question that can go both ways. And I don't consider it biting the bullet. I just consider it making the decision that is in the best for our students. And not with that said, there hasn't been a decision made, and we will weigh heavily the comments we've gotten here and the comments that we have received. I think it's interesting that some of the comments we do receive, the submissions that we have received, the conversations we have on these Zoom calls as we go back and forth, and so there are some profound things that are being said. There are some anecdotal things that are being said. There are some factual things that are being said. But we have a responsibility to weigh all of those things out and make the best decision for our school system and for our children. And so that will be the guiding factor for myself when I sit down and look and weigh the pros and cons. That will always be the ultimate deciding factor of what is best for our children moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Clark.
Thank you for that. Another one for you, Minister. It says, is it true that paras will be reimagined and not used anymore? Paras are concerned.
I'm not sure that that's a question for the commissioner, not myself. I'm not sure why anyone would think about that. We've already said that yes, there will be additional roles and additional positions and different perhaps there are different jobs that persons can do, but no one has said anything about paras or para educators being reimagined or gotten rid of or anything along that like. And it's not the first time I've heard that. And I just honestly don't know where it's coming from. But I would like to take this opportunity to dispel that myth right now. And please ask whoever is asking those questions and putting that out there to just stop, because it's not productive. It doesn't help for us to cloud what already is difficult decisions to make with untruths, simply put. And I really can't address it any more than that.
Thank you for that, Minister. We had a question come in via YouTube that's asking, what if the low birth rate trend is reversed? Will the redesign and only having one school per parish be enough to manage?
That's an interesting question, and one that we do get quite often. As we talk about these particular schools, and we talk about the parish concept and one school per parish with a school that can hold 300 children, that equals 900 children per zone, right? And we have 1,200 in 1,200 in the central, because we have four schools. Currently, Ms. Trott, for that person answering that question, between the Western zone, the total number of students right now is 727. In Central, 600 and 600, in Central, 754, and in the East, 549. With the population trends that currently exist in 6 years, in 2027, because that's all the data that we do have, the current population trends are predicted to be 487 students, primary school students in the Eastern zone, 669 in Central, and 664 in the Western zone. And so there is plenty, and there is plenty of room, or if by some miracle we start to rapidly increase the number of students within our system, we do recognize that there is some room for growth, and part of this plan actually takes that into account. We don't anticipate any of our schools being more than 75% full if this proposal was to come into play, and that leaves us with ample room for expansion. If for some reason we have this birth explosion, in Bermuda, it has taken us 35 years, over 35 years to get to where we are. We're not going to increase the birth rate that rapidly going forward, for sure.
Thank you for that. I don't know if this was answered in the presentation, but would parents have a choice on which school their child attends?
You wanted to get that, Ms. Richards? Good.
Yes, I was going to say parents have an opportunity. Of course, they can apply to their parish primary school, but they can also enroll by zone. But they do have to keep in mind that as it relates to the parish school's proximity or closeness to the school will play a key role.
And enrollment numbers.
Yes, and the enrollment numbers as well, definitely.
Okay, thank you for that. Ms. Horton is saying the document states that Somerset Primary was built in 1960. Sands Grammar School was in the same place as it is now. I do not recall the school being knocked down and rebuilt. Please address this.
The data that we got for our schools came from the Ministry of Public Works, so that's something we'd have to check into. It could very well be talking about that was the last time a major renovation took place. I'm not sure. What we do know is that the school does exist, and it's in that position. It's where it is now, and the data that was used to for our document was data that was gained from what is currently in place when the building professionals from the Department of Public Works and other entities went and did compile this data for us and brought it to us.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. So we do have some more questions, but a lot of them can be found. The answers to them can be found on page 25 from the consultation document, which provides a summary of the current state and the future state of the Bermuda public school system. The link to that document has been placed in the Zoom chat. The ministry will also upload that to Facebook. But if you look at that page and you still have questions, please feel free to go ahead and submit them to us via consultation@moed.bm, as well as if you do have any alternative proposals, please submit your feedback. At the end of this, the Menti code will be open for an additional 24 hours. So if more thoughts and feedback comes through to you after we finish, please go ahead and submit it. It will close at 9 p.m. So at this time, I'm just going to thank everyone for the participation. And we do have to end tonight's meeting. So we'll go ahead to another poll.
No, before we do that, can you just ask, Commissioner, what if we don't make this change?
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I think what we would like to do is just have us reflect for just a moment on what we consider to be a matter of national importance, and that is the education of Bermuda's children. Education impacts every child, every family and household, every parish, community, every business. It impacts our economy. And there have been long-standing national issues about education. And so if we don't make the change, then we will continue to allow those long-standing issues to remain at the price of the education of our children. We want our children, what we basically want for our children is to have a world-class education experience, the best that they deserve. And if we don't make the change, then they don't get to have that type of experience that we want for them. We want it for your children and grandchildren, and we want it for the generations to come. And so we want that high quality, world-class, and I don't think we should accept anything less than a world-class education experience for our children. And if we're not prepared to make this change, that it's really too high a price for our children to pay. They are at the center of everything that we are proposing. And I think as we deliberate and we discuss and we put forward our ideas, that we must always, always place children first and think about what is best for them, but also what is best for their future, because we're getting them ready for their futures. And so I would leave it there and ask that we just reflect on those comments if we don't make the change.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. As we are live streaming and we do need to stick to our time frame, I'm going to ask Ms. Lister if you can go ahead and put your question either in the chat or submit it to us via email so that we can get responded to you. At this time, we are going to go ahead and do the poll so we can capture your sentiments about tonight. So the first question is, were there enough opportunities to share views and ask questions during this meeting? You can say yes, no, or not sure. And then we're asking you to rate this meeting. So you can rate it as excellent, good, or needs improvement. Okay, so the poll results are in. The first question, were there enough opportunities to share views and ask questions during this meeting? 63% said yes, 37% said no. And how would you rate this meeting? 42% said excellent, 53% said good, and 5% said that it needs improvement. Thank you for that. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to the minister so that he can give us our closing remarks.
And thank you, Ms. Trott. Again, I want to acknowledge the contribution of Ms. Arlene Brock. I do want to thank you. It was very well thought out and very thoughtful to what you did present, and it will definitely be taken into account as we compile the final report and look at the pros and cons of making the decisions either way. I know I did receive some comments after the last meeting from some persons from some people that were on the call, and I do appreciate those emails that we have received. They have been forwarded on to consultation.moed.bm so they can be compiled. I do recognize that in some cases you may not think that we've had enough time to answer all of the questions, but we are encouraging you to please send them in, and you will. I know I personally do reply when I do receive the emails to acknowledge them and to discuss, and sometimes we have some back and forth discussions going back and forth about this. This is something that is critical and something that is important. And so with the Menti board staying open until 9 p.m. tomorrow, I think Alicia, you said 9 p.m. and people may have thought it was today. Alicia, I'm sorry, but it is 9 p.m. tomorrow. Please submit your thoughts. All things are welcome, and all things will be recorded, all things will be documented, and all things will be taken into account as we move forward with whatever that final decision is. I do want to let people know that I appreciate them coming out. I appreciate them listening. I know sometimes it sounds, in some cases, when we are entrenched in what we want and what we believe, we feel that the only thing we're hearing from the other side is their opinion, and they're not listening. But I do recognize that and want to actually clarify that we do listen and we are listening. This has been an extensive consultation. Because we recognize that when education doesn't work, Bermuda doesn't work. When education doesn't have the support of Bermuda, it's not gonna happen the way we want it to happen. This is the case with Plan 2022. It was a plan that was put together with extensive consultation with the Bermudian public. If you do refer back to that, you'll easily be able to look at the strategies that were any one of the 5 strategies that are listed in Plan 2022 and see how it relates to what the things that we're talking about now. And so that is proof positive that we are following what the Bermuda public has asked for out of their education system. So with that, I just want to say again, thank everyone for coming out. Please send any additional comments to consultation@moed.bm, or be sure to go to the website and fill out the consultation form. We look forward to hearing from you. We look forward to reading your comments. So I just want to say thank you everyone for coming out, and good night, God bless, and stay safe.
That's bringing, and also the introduction of the mite brings viruses. So we have all of these different stresses of the bees that are a threat. Also in Bermuda we have ants. The Argentine ant is a big problem. If a hive starts to weaken out, you'll find ants by the millions just coming in, and also frogs, and toads. Sorry.